Hi everyone, this video is going to showcase the peer review for the Stereotypes essay, Stereotypes APA research essay. And so I'm going to go ahead and share that on the screen. Any peer review that we do in this class, it mimics my grade sheet. And that's for a reason. I want students to be able to think about how I grade. Every instructor might be a little bit different. Different instructors are going to approach the grading process in different ways. There's a lot of different evaluation tools that are out there for instructors to use, different pedagogies into how we evaluate when we're looking at a piece of writing and what attributes it has that make it good or not good. And I've been in a lot of different norming sessions with faculty members at other institutions where, we sit and several of us like look at an essay that's been written by a student based on an assignment, and then we evaluate it and determine, what would the grade be? Is this an A-level essay, a B-level essay, a C-level essay, or below? And if even within those categories, is it a high A? Is it a low A? Is it a high B? Is it a low B? Would you grade this and post an 82 or an 86 or an 89? And you'll get some variance, right? You'll get some variance within instructors. And so I tell a lot of students, like, my experiences as a younger person when I was a line judge for flag football, it's harder than you think to decide, did the tip of someone's cleat touch the line or the tip of the football touch, this imaginary line or not? Did it make that next yard line? Did it make the mark? Is it an 89 or is it a 90? Or is it a 91? Those can be really hard decisions for a lot of instructors, and there can be some variance. So in a math situation in mathematics, we'd have one right answer, period. And maybe there's two or three different strategies you could use to get to that right answer. In English, we could all have different ideas about something and write about it in so many different ways. There can be quite a few wrong answers, but quite a few right answers too, and then answers that are along a spectrum in between. And so how do we evaluate a piece of writing? I adhere to pedagogies surrounding a concept called writing across the curriculum, where I think very carefully about not only what would a group of English instructors think and what mechanisms would they use to evaluate a piece of writing, but also what about instructors from other disciplines, such as history, such as psychology, such as sociology, such as anthropology, such as environmental science, business, all kinds of other majors where an instructor might assign a paper. And then I think about what are the most basic criteria that instructors in any field are going to expect in the event that they assign a writing assignment to a student. And so I think in those terms, first and foremost, general. So assuming that most of the students that I teach are not English majors, but still are going to be taking classes that require some writing, what are professors at large going to look for, period. And then we get into the fine tuning of what would it be that gets a paper to an A level amongst a group of even English professors per se. Okay. So number one, when I set up this grading rubric, I'm hoping that you can think about this and keep this example with you so that you have it for consideration, just for your own sake as you develop research papers for other classes. Use this as a guide, even if it's a different topic that the professor has assigned. I feel like what I've designed as far as this peer review sheet, which is my grade sheet, is pretty close to what a lot of professors out there are going to expect from you when they assign any piece of writing, okay, or any type of writing assignment. So number one, before I even read your paper, I want to see the foundations of the house. I turn to the back. If it's printed and there's 5 or 6 pages, I turn to the very last page and I look at the sources that the student used as the foundations of the house, if that makes sense. Before we even build the house, what materials did we bring to the work site before we even started building our house? What sources did you look into before you even started writing, or maybe after you had started writing? In this case, it was an opinion piece, so you already had an opinion on something and you already had your reasons, you already were able to do the pre-writing and form that, possibly without looking at anything, right? But even so, what materials and what sources were used. I look at that before I even read the student's thoughts. I just look at the back page, or if it's on a screen, I scroll to the bottom and I look at the back page and I take a glance at what the sources were. And so then I've got those kind of in my mind as I begin to read. And then as I'm reading, I see the student's thoughts, I see the student's opinion, I hear the student's voice and that student's own unique individual perspective. And then, oh, you know what? Here's a mention of a source. I remember seeing that on the list. Oh, here the student has mentioned another source as a piece of evidence. I think I remember seeing that on the list too. And I'm not going to remember them all, as I'm reading, but I take a look, 30 seconds to a minute. I take a look at the sources. Um, and then I start reading the paper. That's me. Other professors may do it differently, but I can guarantee you, any professor in any class, regardless of what they assign, they're going to care. It does matter. What sources did the student use? Did the student document those sources? If I turn to that back page and all I see is just a list of links, copy and paste of a bunch of URL links, and that's it, and no further information provided, it looks sloppy. I've already got an idea in my head of like what level of actual writing went into this paper. If the resources were done sloppily, um, I mean I could be wrong, and so I shouldn't like bias myself, right? But I'm already worried about what does the paper look like. If these resources were just thrown together, slapped a bunch of links onto the page, or if there are no resources even included and they were supposed to be, and that was part of the assignment, that already looks bad. Okay. So what you can do as a student, and in my opinion, for any class, even if you don't consider yourself to be a very good writer, if you will put some time and effort into finding credible sources. If the professor requests academic sources, use those. Document them really well. Don't just throw the links on there. Take the time and document the sources based on the questions you see in this box. Author, title, source, date, and URL. And if you run it through a citation generator, an AI citation, software that produces the citations for you, just glance back through and double check that that citation generator did a good job, because the sources that you use and the work that you put into that final page documenting the sources, and whether it's an APA style, we call it references. If it's MLA style, we call it works cited. That sets the tone for the whole paper in the professor's mind. And even if you mess up a few on some of your sentences are kind of choppy, kind of awkward, if there's one spot where maybe your sentences aren't even perfectly clear, I'm not quite sure what you meant to say right here in paragraph 3. I kind of thought, I think I understand, but I'm not sure. But I know you put in some time into researching. I'm likely to be a little more forgiving. Does that make sense? I'm hoping it makes sense. Um, I think many professors are likely to be more forgiving of a few like not very well worded sentences or awkward sentences or unclear sentences here and there throughout your essay, if they see, well, at least the student put in a tremendous amount of time into finding some good solid sources and to base this on those sources. So again, I start with this box and I do it for a reason. I'm hoping I can help you think through the process that other professors may use when they grade your work. So how many sources do the student have? Did they document these things? Always check the Purdue Owl. They keep up to date information. I love the Purdue Owl, and I think that moving forward from this class, it's a resource you can use, put out by Purdue University for free, that can help you, whether it's an APA style paper, an MLA style paper, put together the most current, right? Because MLA and APA update every couple of years, and there's a lot of consistencies, but then every now and then there's these little subtleties and slight differences, from the 2012 edition to the 2014 edition to the 2016 edition. And then you move forward every 2 or 3 years, they're updating their editions and their citation requirements. Well, some instructors who've been teaching for 30 years, maybe you're stuck still on a previous edition or something like that. They're going to be close if you use an older edition, but Purdue Owl is always going to have the most current edition of what's expected with the APA and MLA style. So I encourage you to use that. Are academic sources present? I always ask myself this question as an instructor. They may or may not be required, especially for 100 level classes. Many instructors are comfortable with you using a variety of credible sources. They don't necessarily have to be academic per se, but I do encourage students, if you haven't already, watch the video that's linked into your Canvas shell regarding academic sources, what they are, how to identify them, in case you are asked by a professor to use academic sources only, or to at least include one or two, which will be coming. Whether you've encountered that already or not, that will be coming in your future as a college student. Are a variety of source types present? That's of interest to me as well. Are the sources relevant? This is important. Did the student just go to Google and pick the first 3 sources that popped up on a Google search, or did the student dig a little bit deeper than that? So I've looked at the list of sources, and then as I start to read, do these sources matter based on what I know the topic of the paper to be? Are these worthwhile sources to include for this type of paper? Here's what the topic is. Do these sources seem like they matter? Okay, or they're just something that popped up randomly on a Google search? Do they seem credible, believable, trustworthy, whether they're academic or not, legitimate? Do they seem compelling? Like, oh, this one right here looks pretty interesting. Just looking at the title, like, wow, that is very relevant to this person's topic. And, it's an interesting title. Maybe I'm inclined to read this, right? That would be the meaning of compelling. Formatting, again, use the OWL at Purdue to help you there. So as I'm reading, once I start reading, I'm looking to see if there are in-text citations mentioned throughout the text, whether that's in the sentence itself, according to author, Stephen Williamson, this is what happened, and it's an article from 2019 or something. I'm looking to see if that's worded into the sentence. Or if there's a parentheses, at least one per paragraph, but it may need to be more than one in some cases. But like as you're talking about something and you mention some type of data or some type of example from the media or whatever, did you indicate to me as I'm reading the paragraph itself where that came from? And so I should be able to very easily, whether it's with a parentheses, either including the author's last name or the year, if it's APA, it's author last name and year that we want. But I should be able to really quickly, like, oh, okay, this says Williamson, 1999. And then I go down to your list of sources in APA style and I look at, oh, there's, Williamson, comma, Stephen, 1999. The reason that this stereotype persists, or whatever the title is, and I am able to see the full information. Okay, so you want to make sure that those are there and that it's real clear in each paragraph as you mention something that you did find somewhere else, that you indicate where that came from as you are writing. And so that's part of, I think any professor would notice that. Underlining a thesis, meaning the main idea for the entire essay itself. Underlining the main idea for each supporting paragraph. So let's say professors, and I've been around a lot of professors in my short 15 years as a teacher, but if they are just glancing through the paper, they're reading fast, they have a lot of essays to read, and a lot of papers that they're grading. Let's say the professor does a quick read and it's not a very slow and meticulous read, maybe on the same level that your English instructors are going to comb through a paper. Other instructors might read it more quickly. When a professor reads it quickly, can they tell if there's 8 paragraphs here, what the main gist of each paragraph is just by looking at your first sentence? Every single paragraph, is there a main idea here? Okay, I know what this paragraph's about. And now they've included some details. Oh, here's a source. But in general, even if I spent 5 minutes or less just really quickly going through the paper, I want and I encourage all students to see to adhere to a mode of writing where you're in the habit of making sure that you have a main idea for every single paragraph, preferably at the beginning of that paragraph. Main ideas, if you read and study this, they can appear anywhere in the paragraph, but I would say near the beginning helps for professors who are skim reading, grading, or any reader for that matter, to be able to clearly understand this is what this paragraph right here is about. And now I can read the further details, but the main idea, it's right here, it's at the top, and then they can follow your paper accordingly. I think that's very important. Word choice, and this is where we're getting a little technical. When you avoid contraction, slang, and unprofessional speech just in general, unless it's being used for a reason, you give the entire paper an overall impression, not profession, excuse me, impression of professionalism, an overall impression that you put in the time. Um, when you use, it's not wrong to use a contraction such as I'm or isn't or didn't or don't or something like that. But when you do those frequently, shorten your words frequently, it gives a certain impression, overall feel to the essay versus when you make the effort consistently to spell out words, it gives the paper a different feel, different impression. Okay. So, and slang and a professional speech in general. So that's something you can do no matter who you are or what level of writing you feel you're at to improve any paper. Sentence fluency, I think, is the hardest. You've probably heard me say this on a different video. One of the hardest categories to get to, but I encourage you to read any paper out loud before you submit it. I encourage you to have someone else, if it's a roommate, brother, sister, boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever, hey, could you read this paragraph out loud to me really quick? And you listen to how it sounds in someone else's head. May not be the way you intended for it to sound. So, but reading it out loud and yourself, also having someone else read it out loud to you is going to help you listen to how it sounds and smooth out trouble sentences, if that makes sense. Sentences that are a little bit awkward and choppy, you'll hear it when someone else reads it. If they get stuck, there's a chance that maybe that's just them reading and, not reading it well, but there's also a chance that maybe it's you. And the way that that sentence is worded and written, if it was hard for them to get it out, then maybe it is an awkward sentence that it's at least worth going back and looking at, right? So I tell students that's one of the best things you can do. I look to see whether the author's voice is clearly there. I do not ever want to see students like copying and pasting giant chunks of quotes into an essay. Quotes should be used occasionally and as needed, and then you're going to elaborate on what that quote means, things of that nature, so that it's never a situation where you have a main idea for each paragraph, and then the entire rest of the paragraph was just quoted from somewhere else. That's not not plagiarism, but it's not true writing. You didn't really write that paper, right? Unless a majority of what's being said is your own original words, but then you did reference sources here and there, okay? So it's not that I take a fine-tooth comb and like measure this per se, but in general, when I see quoted material coming into a paragraph, I should still be able to feel that the majority of that paragraph is the student's own voice. Or even if you do have one or two paragraphs where there's a really big long quote that you think is important and you need that big long quote to be there, you've still got other paragraphs surrounding it where you were talking about the meaning of that quote and why it's important, why it's relevant to your main ideas, etc. Okay. Conventions, spelling, grammar, punctuation, mechanics, things like that. That matters. Take a few extra minutes at the end of your paper. We have such wonderful AI tools at our disposal to give you the little squiggly lines and help you make those better. But if you hustle and turn it in and don't do that, it gives, again, a poor impression for the whole paper. So taking that extra few minutes at the end of your first draft, taking that extra few minutes at the end of your final draft before you turn it in can make a difference. Voice, it's already been mentioned. Always avoid. So ideally in a research paper, we even want to avoid first person I and me, but we always, 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 no matter what, want to avoid the word you or your in an essay. So it's better to go with he, she, it, they, third person writing in research papers as you go through college. And then there may be situations where the professor gives you an assignment, and it's okay to share a little bit of your personal story and say the word I or me or we within it. Plagiarism result that's going to be determined by any given instructor, and there's different ways that we do that. But what were the strongest sources or sources of evidence in this essay? What were your strongest paragraphs? What were the weaker sections? Like, I think as you evaluate your own work as well as, someone else's in any class, identifying what the strong points were and the weaker points were. It's what any instructor is going to do when they evaluate a piece of writing. If they make a decision that it's a low B, they would need to be able to justify like what were the weak points of the essay that caused this essay to be a B or a low B versus what were the parts of it that caused it to be an A. Those are just basic that you'd want to do anytime. This last little part that's attached to this, it's not part of the peer review itself, but I do think it's important. This was taken, Bloom's taxonomy. It was developed by Benjamin Bloom back in the 1940s, but it's been referenced, it's been repeated. There's been other designs and images placed with it. It's even been updated in recent times. This particular image and breakdown came from Vanderbilt University's Center for Teaching, and so it's available at their website, but the concept originally came from Benjamin Bloom. It's a very popular pedagogy that influences a lot of professors in a lot of different disciplines. But basically, the way that this particular pyramid is set up, it is set up in such a way that these are like the stages of learning. Okay. Why would I need a graph that shows the stages of learning to help students think about their writing? Well, when a high school professor or a middle school, high school professor, high school teacher, middle school teacher, or instructor assigns a book report and says, okay, everybody in class read To Kill a Mockingbird and tell me about it. These lower levels of the pyramid are basically what you would do with a high school level book report. You just show the professor that you read the book, you remember and are able to repeat and describe some of the basic facts, like the plot of what happened in the book, the characters in the book, and what were the basic concepts of the book. So basically, if I assign that book to 30 students, all 30 students are just going to tell me what happened in To Kill a Mockingbird and who the main characters were. And, here's a few concepts or themes that were going on, and here's what this book was about. Okay, that's a high school level book report, right? Demonstrating that you understand some of those main ideas or concepts, deeper meanings of what was going on in To Kill a Mockingbird. Just show me that you understand it. And you can usually find a million papers online that are about this or articles about it. And then you look at those and then you add those to your book report. And basically you are describing, discussing, and explaining a little bit more about the main ideas of that book. Okay, well, that's still a high school book report. If you can look at this pyramid and to do your best for any college essay to move up the pyramid, so it's not part of my grade sheet. My grade sheet is up here, okay? That's what I'm using to grade it. But the more you can write paragraphs where you're using information that is available online, but you're applying it to a new situation that you come up with yourself. That's better, right? That's better than the average high school book report. If you can show me that if you can analyze something, like here's a graph, here's a statistic, 15% of youth in this particular population have experimented with fentanyl or, something like that. Well, what does that mean? Analyze that one statistic for me and you explain in your own words, should I be concerned about this statistic or not? And if so, why? Why should this matter? You analyze it, okay? Now that's at a deeper level. And you can look at some of the words that they've included here of like things that you want to think about as you get to that level. Evaluating, justifying your standard decision, and then ultimately creating or producing something that's new and original. Taking something and maybe bringing things into it. Maybe it's a common theme, and you know that other people in the class are going to write about this same thing because you've all been assigned the same assignment. But what's something different, new or different that I thought that I've had that I could express that might set my essay apart from the other 29 essays that the instructor's going to read. Some type of unique and original thought that I did not find online. I came up with this. You may not be ready to be at this level with any college level assignment. I don't expect students to walk into English 101 and create something that's purely new and original and that I've never seen or read before or not similar to something that I've seen or read before. I don't expect students to be at the top of the pyramid when you come to college, but the more you can try to get out of this lower zone of simply just regurgitating, here's what the book was about, and move up the pyramid. So these are things for you to think about moving forward from this English class. Again, this is the actual grade sheet. Many students can achieve the basics that are on this grade sheet and do pretty well on this essay. But this is to kind of help you get to next level. If you can think about how well did I at least apply, analyze, and evaluate the information from the sources that I found, this is a much better essay than an average high school level book report. Okay. And that's what I'm trying to challenge everyone in here to do, and why I've added this extra page to the peer review. There's nothing that you are required to like do with this as far as like grading your peers or anything like that. But I want everyone to take a look at this as you read someone else's paper, but also as you think about improving your own. What more could I do in paragraph 3 to take it from these lower levels up to one of these higher levels? So even if it's not at the top, how do I get it from this zone up into, let's say, this zone? And I definitely encourage you to take a few more minutes on this illustration here. Read some of the things that the wording that they use of things that you can do to improve it. And then I've written some paragraphs. It might bore students to read these paragraphs, but basically what I've just expressed to you verbally, that's written here for students to see. I'm hoping this was helpful. I'm hoping that you'll take this particular video onward with you into your other college classes, not just my class. I'm hoping that you feel encouraged after having watched this video as far as thinking about like, okay, I feel like I can do this. I feel like this was a scary essay, but the way she's got the grade sheet broken down, I think I can at least get most of the points in all of these categories and do okay on this essay. So I'm hoping you're encouraged. But I'm also hoping, again, even more importantly, that once you finish this class, you will save a copy of this worksheet and just use it as a nice little guide for yourself moving forward. Many professors, they just tell you, write me a 3-page paper about chapter 14, and you don't have a lot to go on beyond that. But I'm hoping that the guide I've designed for you will help you think, well, I'm assigned a 3-page paper on chapter 14. What do I even write about? And how do I know if I've done a good job or not? The basic categories that I've placed for you there, those are categories that I feel from having worked amongst a lot of different professors and a lot of different backgrounds. I feel like those are categories that if you'll seek to pay attention to those as you're writing, you'll do well in any class. So best of luck to you on this essay. I look forward to reading your final work, and best of luck to you in your future writing assignments. Have a good day.